Hello, welcome. Let me share a little story about this recording process.
What would you do if you saw a catastrophe rushing toward your home, but the entire world chose to cover their eyes and laugh? The story you are about to hear isn't just about surviving a nightmare. It is a profound lesson on the deadly price of arrogance and the quiet power of listening to the voices we usually ignore. It was the week before the 4th of July in Cape Horizon. Our town was a postcard-perfect stretch of the American coastline. The boardwalk smelled of saltwater taffy, sunscreen, and fried dough. Banners fluttered from the street lamps. The summer tourist dollars were the absolute lifeblood of the community, and everyone was focused on the upcoming festival. Everyone except 19-year-old Leo. Leo wasn't like the other kids his age. He didn't care about beach bonfires or surfing. He was on the autism spectrum, and while eye contact made him deeply uncomfortable, numbers made perfect sense. He spent his days in a cramped room overlooking the bay, tracking deep ocean buoys, barometric drops, and tidal charts. The ocean spoke to him in a language of pure data. And on a Tuesday morning, the ocean screamed. Leo stared at his monitors, his breath catching in his throat. A massive, unprecedented pressure fault had fractured offshore. The data pointed to one terrifying conclusion: a double tide. A freak oceanic surge that was going to hit right at the peak of the festival. The town's century-old concrete seawall wouldn't just fail, it would be pulverized. Panic tightening his chest, Leo printed the charts. He ran. He didn't stop until he pushed through the heavy oak doors of the town hall. Inside, Mayor Harrison Blake was in the middle of a packed committee meeting, arguing about fireworks budgets and parade routes. Mayor Blake was a man who loved his reflection and loved a good profit margin even more. "Mr. Mayor!" Leo gasped. He was out of breath, his hands shaking violently as he held up the crumpled papers. "The water, the pressure, it's coming!" The room went dead silent. "Leo, son," the mayor sighed, rubbing his temples in annoyance. "We are in the middle of planning the biggest revenue weekend of the year. Now is not the time for your weather hobbies." "No!" Leo forced the word out, though his voice cracked. "A double tide! The seawall will break! You have to cancel the festival! You have to evacuate the beaches!" A low chuckle rippled through the room. A local hotel developer in the back row sneered. "Cancel the 4th of July because the weird kid looked at a spreadsheet?" Laughter erupted, cruel, dismissive, and loud. Leo's face burned. He tried to explain the data, but the stress made him stutter. His hands flapped against his sides, a nervous tic he couldn't control when overwhelmed. The more he tried to speak, the more they laughed. They didn't see a warning. They saw a joke. "All right, that's enough," Mayor Blake snapped, waving a hand. "Security, escort the boy out. We have a town to run." Two guards grabbed Leo by the arms, dragging him backward out of the hall. His papers, the only proof of the coming doom, scattered across the polished floor, trampled by expensive leather shoes. Thrown out onto the hot pavement, Leo sat alone. He looked up at the clear blue sky. It looked perfectly peaceful. But Leo knew the truth. The clock was ticking, and nobody was coming to save them. Gemini Danoi. The concrete steps of Town Hall were still hot against Leo's palms as he picked himself up. He had one card left to play. Dr. Eris Thorne. 10 years ago, Dr. Thorne was the most respected meteorologist on the eastern seaboard. Then, a blown hurricane prediction cost the state millions in unnecessary evacuations, and the media tore him to shreds. Now he lived like a ghost at the edge of town, hiding behind drawn blinds and a half-empty glass of bourbon. Leo spread his crumpled charts across Thorne's dusty kitchen table. He pointed at the red pressure lines, his finger tapping frantically against the paper. Thorne put on his heavy reading glasses. He squinted at the numbers, and then the color completely drained from his face. "My God," Thorne whispered, the glass trembling in his hand. "You're right. The fault line is buckling. The seawall won't hold a fraction of this." "Come with me," Leo pleaded, his eyes wide with desperate hope. "If you tell them, the mayor will listen. You have the degree. You have the voice." But Thorne slowly backed away from the table. He shook his head, his eyes full of a cowardly, hollow fear. "I can't, kid," he muttered, looking at the floor. "They crucified me last time. I'm not going back out there just to be called a madman on the evening news. I'm sorry, I'm packing my truck and I'm leaving. You should too." The door clicked shut. And just like that, Leo was entirely, utterly alone. He could have run. He could have packed a bag, bought a bus ticket, and left Cape Horizon to its watery grave. But Leo remembered the little kids eating ice cream on the boardwalk. He remembered the old men fishing off the pier. He couldn't save the town, but maybe he could build a lifeboat. That afternoon, Leo emptied his entire savings account. Every single penny. He marched up to the highest point in town, a rocky bluff overlooking the bay, and leased the old Miller boatyard. It was an abandoned, rotting warehouse, but it had the elevation. For the next 5 days, while the town hung up red, white, and blue festival bunting, Leo worked until his hands bled. He didn't build a rigid concrete wall. He used an ancient technique his late grandfather, a master shipwright, had taught him. He drove deep, flexible pilings into the bedrock. He rigged heavy steel cables and suspended a reinforced wooden platform high inside the warehouse structure. It was designed to sway, to absorb the crushing kinetic energy of a massive wave, rather than fight it. It looked strange, like a giant wooden birdcage hanging in the rafters. And of course, the town noticed. On the third day, a silver Jeep Wrangler pulled up to the chain-link fence. It was Marcus Blake, the mayor's son, flanked by his surfer friends. They leaned against the hood, cracking open sodas and pointing. "Hey, Rain Man!" Marcus shouted over the fence, a cruel smirk plastered on his sun-tanned face. "Building a spaceship? Or just a giant birdhouse for your imaginary friends?" The boys erupted into laughter. Someone threw an empty soda can. It clattered against the fence, landing right at Leo's boots. Leo froze. The noise, the mocking faces. It was like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. He dropped his heavy wrench. Tears stung the corners of his eyes, hot and humiliating. He wanted to scream. He wanted to walk away and let the ocean teach Marcus Blake a lesson he would never survive. But Leo looked down at the dented soda can. Then he looked out at the dark, churning horizon. The sky was still a beautiful summer blue, but the sea was already pulling back. Leo picked up his wrench. He wiped his face with the back of his dirty sleeve, turned his back to the laughter, and tightened the next steel bolt. Because the storm didn't care about their ignorance, and he still had work to do. The 4th of July dawned with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Down on the boardwalk, Cape Horizon was electric. EDM music bumped from massive speakers, mixing with the heavy, sweet smell of funnel cakes and coconut sunscreen. Mayor Blake was shaking hands, wearing a red, white, and blue tie, beaming at the record-breaking crowds. It was everything the town had hoped for. But the ocean was behaving strangely. Around noon, the water began to pull back. And I don't mean just a low tide. The bay seemed to empty out, draining away like water down a massive, invisible sink. It pulled back half a mile, exposing dark mudflats, forgotten rusted shipwrecks, and thousands of flapping fish. The tourists cheered. They grabbed their smartphones, hiked up their board shorts, and ran out onto the wet sand to hunt for sea glass and take selfies. They thought it was a miracle, a rare, magical bonus to their beach day. But inside the Salty Spoon Diner, Sarah wasn't smiling. Sarah was a local. She had poured coffee in this town for 20 years, raising her kids on tips and saltwater breeze. She knew the rhythm of the coast. She wiped down the diner counter, her eyes locked on the front window. The sky was perfectly clear, but the air felt heavy, thick, like the exact moment before a lightning strike. Then she saw the birds. A massive dark cloud of seagulls, crows, and pelicans blotted out the sun for a brief second. Thousands of them. And they weren't squawking. They were completely, terrifyingly silent, flying frantically inland, away from the water as if the devil himself was chasing them. Sarah dropped her rag. Her heart started to hammer against her ribs. Suddenly, she remembered the pale, terrified face of the young autistic boy who had been tossed out of town hall just days ago. She remembered Leo's trembling hands, his scattered charts, his stuttering voice begging them to listen. A double tide. Sarah didn't wait for the news. She didn't ask her manager for permission. She ripped off her apron, grabbed her 2 young kids who were eating fries in the back booth, and threw them into her old station wagon. "Mom, where are we going? The parade is about to start," her daughter asked, confused. "Higher ground," Sarah said, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Right now, high above the town on the rocky bluffs, Leo was standing at the edge of his wooden sanctuary. His hands were blistered, raw, and wrapped in silver duct tape. He grunted, pulling the final, heavy steel cable tight, securing the suspended platform. His muscles burned, but the mechanism worked. The massive wooden floor hung suspended in the rafters, designed to sway, to absorb, to survive. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked down at the festival below. It looked so small from up here. The colorful umbrellas, the flashing stage lights, the tiny figures dancing blindly on the exposed ocean floor. The town's emergency siren, a rusted metal horn on top of the firehouse, remained dead and silent. The mayor had made sure nobody touched it. Leo leaned over the heavy wooden railing, his breath turning shallow. He pulled a pair of heavy brass binoculars to his eyes and scanned the deep horizon. There was no sound at first, just a strange, deep vibration, a hum you could feel in your teeth. Then he saw it. Far out where the dark blue water met the sky, a thin, solid white crest appeared. It wasn't a wave, it was a moving wall. A mountain of dark water, stretching as far as the eye could see, swallowing the horizon and moving toward Cape Horizon with the relentless speed of a freight train. The music below kept playing, the people kept laughing. But Leo reached over and flipped the heavy switch on his control panel. The massive industrial floodlights he had mounted to the roof of the boatyard hummed and then flared to life. He was ready. The sound didn't start as a crash. It started as a low guttural roar, like 100 freight trains tearing through the center of the earth. Down on the beach, the thumping bass of the festival music was suddenly drowned out. People stopped dancing. They froze, turning toward the horizon, shielding their eyes against the glare of the afternoon sun. And then, the sky simply vanished behind a 50-foot wall of black churning water. The century-old concrete seawall, the absolute pride of Cape Horizon, didn't even slow it down. It shattered like cheap glass, exploding into a cloud of dust and ocean spray. The water hit Main Street with unimaginable fury. Tents, concert stages, and parked cars were tossed into the air like children's toys. The joyful cheers of the 4th of July festival turned into a chorus of pure, absolute terror. The ocean swallowed the boardwalk in seconds, turning the picturesque town into a violent, swirling blender of splintered wood, twisted metal, and dark water. Marcus Blake, the mayor's son, tried to run, but he wasn't fast enough. A massive piece of the shattered boardwalk slammed into his leg, snapping the bone with a sickening crack. He fell, screaming as the freezing, muddy water dragged him under. He fought his way to the surface, gasping for air, swallowing salt water. He clung desperately to the top of a submerged street lamp, his knuckles white. He was completely alone. The friends who had laughed with him just days ago were gone, scattered by the surge. But high above the nightmare, cutting through the blinding sea spray and the gathering darkness, a beam of light exploded into the sky. It was Leo's warehouse, the birdcage, glowing brilliantly, like a lighthouse on the edge of the ruined world. Up on the rocky bluff, the monstrous waves slammed against the cliffs, shaking the very bedrock. But the warehouse held. The deep, flexible pilings absorbed the crushing shock, allowing the suspended wooden floor to sway safely, exactly as Leo's grandfather had taught him. Leo stood at the edge of the open loading dock, rain whipping across his face. He grabbed the heavy, coiled rescue lines he had prepared. He was just about to throw the first line down into the dark, swirling streets below when a heavy hand grabbed his shoulder. Leo flinched. He spun around, raising his arms to protect himself. It was Dr. Eris Thorne. The old meteorologist was completely drenched, out of breath and shivering violently. But his eyes were finally awake. "I saw the lights, kid!" Thorne yelled over the roaring wind, tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "I couldn't drive away. I couldn't leave you to do this alone. Show me what to do." Together they hurled the heavy steel cables down into the flooded ruins. Through the blinding spray, Leo saw a figure thrashing in the churning water directly below the bluff. It was Marcus, the same boy who had thrown the soda can at his feet, the boy who had mocked his voice and humiliated him. Marcus looked up, his face pale with shock and impending death. He reached out, but he couldn't grab the cable. His broken leg was acting like an anchor, dragging him under the violent currents. Leo didn't hesitate. He didn't think about the cruelty, the laughter, or the bullying. He only saw a terrified human being drowning in the dark. "Hold the line!" Leo screamed to Dr. Thorne. Before the old man could stop him, Leo clipped a heavy carabiner to his own belt and jumped. He plunged into the freezing, violent ocean. Debris battered his ribs, knocking the wind out of his lungs. But he swam with desperate, frantic energy. He reached Marcus just as the boy's head slipped beneath the surface. Leo dove down, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his shirt. He hauled him up, gasping for air, and wrapped his arms tightly around his bully. "I got you!" Leo yelled over the deafening roar of the ocean, his voice finally clear and steady. "I've got you! Pull, Doc! Pull!" Slowly, agonizingly, the mechanical winch groaned. The thick cable pulled tight, and together, clinging to each other in the storm, the two boys were lifted out of the hungry, violent jaws of the double tide. The morning after the double tide was terrifyingly quiet. When the sun finally broke through the gray clouds, it illuminated a Cape horizon that no longer existed. The boardwalk was gone. Main Street was a jagged graveyard of splintered lumber, twisted cars, and thick, dark ocean mud. The festival, the absolute pride of the town, was completely erased. But high up on the rocky bluff, the old Miller boatyard stood firm. Inside Leo's suspended wooden sanctuary, over 100 shivering, exhausted people were huddled together under heavy thermal blankets. Dr. Thorne moved quietly among them, passing out bottled water and wrapping bandages. In the corner, resting on a pile of canvas tarps, was Marcus. His broken leg was carefully splinted. His face was pale and bruised, but he was breathing. He was alive. And sitting quietly by the open loading dock, looking out at the ruined bay, was Leo. His hands were wrapped in bloody duct tape. His clothes were soaked. He was exhausted. Heavy, wet footsteps echoed on the wooden ramp. It was Mayor Harrison Blake. His expensive red, white, and blue tie was gone. His suit was caked in freezing mud. He had spent the entire night wading through the wreckage, convinced he had lost his only son to the dark water. When the mayor saw Marcus resting safely in the corner, he collapsed. The proud, arrogant politician fell to his hands and knees on the rough wooden floor. He crawled to his son, burying his face in Marcus's wet shoulder, sobbing openly, uncontrollably. The entire warehouse was silent. Only the sound of the mayor's broken weeping filled the room. Slowly, Harrison Blake stood up. He turned and walked over to the young man he had ordered thrown out of town hall just days before. The mayor didn't offer a handshake. He didn't offer a politician's excuse. He simply sank to his knees right there on the wet floorboards directly in front of Leo. "I'm sorry," the mayor whispered, his voice cracking, tears streaming down his face. "I was blind. We were all so proud and so blind. You tried to save us, and we laughed at you. My God, how do you ever forgive us?" Leo looked down at the mayor. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked tired and deeply sad. Leo reached out and gently placed his bruised, taped hand on the mayor's trembling shoulder. "The ocean isn't to blame for rising, sir," Leo said softly, his voice clear and steady. "A storm just does what a storm has to do. The mistake wasn't the water. The mistake is when we close our eyes and refuse to see it coming." In the years that followed, Cape Horizon slowly rebuilt, but they didn't build rigid concrete walls anymore. They built flexible foundations. They built structures that could sway, adapt, and survive. The blueprints weren't drawn by expensive city planners. They were drawn by a quiet young man on the autism spectrum and an old meteorologist who finally found his courage again. They learned that sometimes the people who look the most different, the ones who struggle to speak, are the only ones who can truly see the truth. So let me ask you something. When the crowd is walking the wrong way and someone is standing all alone pointing at an approaching storm, do you laugh with the crowd, or do you have the courage to step out, stand beside them, and help them build a lifeboat? Thank you so much for listening to this story today. If it moved you or made you think differently about the world, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We have many more stories to share. I'll see you in the next one.